Good idea. If you make these into video form, so you should do is you should make your own subtitles. So every time someone makes a
Well, I really didn't think that our first episode of Only Weird Breaking News would happen on February 27th, 2025. And I really don't think Nate Taylor thought that would happen because he's currently flying back from the NFL Combine. So the two guys you really want to hear from, we'll take it from here.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Trey Smith is reportedly being franchise tagged by the Kansas City Chiefs, which means the dominoes begin to tumble in the offseason plan. I am Joshua Brisco, and Seth Keysor hasn't even gotten to start pretending to be Brett Veach yet, and the moves are already being made. Seth, how you doing? You're at the home office. I know child number 12 or 13, Cole, is just off screen playing a VR video game of some sort. So I feel like the action over there in the Keysor household is probably pretty good. We'll get into the Trey Smith thing in a minute. What are the vibes like in the Keysor compound?
The vibes are terrific here in the Keysor compound. I somehow feel somewhat freer today. Something feels a little bit different, as though a certain amount of Karenness has been removed from my life. None of our listeners are going to understand that, and that's not because Nate's not here, by the way.
That is such an important clarification.
Ooh, yes.
That is... Seth,
you kind
I
of
don't tell you this often enough. That's a great catch.
Yeah, you kind of had to listen to last week's intro, which drew a few like Twitter DMs, like
wellness checks.
Yeah, everything okay, Seth? It's like yeah. No, I'm great. Life is good.
You know why I feel freer?
What?
Something I also feel freer.
Yeah,
because Tucker gave me the login info, so actually I can mute you now if needed. And I have now an untoward amount of power. I feel like Tony Reale, but somehow even more powerful than that. I exercised it as the loading screen was up and you and Cole were having a conversation. I went ahead and just went ahead and muted that for you, so wouldn't even have to worry about it. And now, if I feel like you're about to say something you shouldn't, I can step right in and help you filter.
That's practically every time I open my mouth, you're like 50.
Oh yeah, no, this is gonna be really good. No, it's going to be really, really good.
I don't like this.
Let's get right into it then. Let's get right into the good stuff, and I won't make you, I promise not to do that ad nauseum throughout the show today. But franchise tag is apparently coming for Trey Smith. This was not something that we expected. It was not something that Nate expected. It was not something that anyone in Chiefs media circles expected. There are a few different things that I think are coming into play here now, but the tag's been placed on Trey Smith. That number's coming in a little bit over $23 million on a one-year deal, but the vast majority of the reporting around that news today has been about how the Chiefs intend to use this as an opportunity to extend the window, to extend Trey Smith. I don't think anyone right now has any expectation that he will be playing under the salary, why are you dancing, Seth? It's so distracting. Your eyes are all over the place and you're bouncing. And I can't have you in Bob the Tomato mode when there's just the two of us.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm in like a chair that kind of rocks a little bit. And so it actually just bounces me up and down. And I was looking at Chiefs over the cap calculator.
It was making you dance. It was so good.
I think it's stressing me out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because if you do nothing else and you just click franchise Trey Smith, well, let's see. Now that we know how much cap space the teams are going to have, they've got this unexpected cap windfall. Surely that will mean they are $17.6 million over the cap. Now, a lot is going to change between now and when free agency happens. I don't love the idea like, oh, well, we're extending the window. So does that mean you're going to have him under the tag during free agency? Like, you mean that time period where you sign other free agents? Because the last time that sort of thing happened, it very much limited their ability to do certain things. And I understand the idea of wanting to keep Trey Smith. I do. And I think later on in the show, or later on, maybe during this exact conversation, because maybe we'll stick to the rundown, I don't mind talking about reasons to do it, because on Tuesday, I kind of took one side, talking about why I probably wouldn't do it. But I also said I wouldn't necessarily be upset. And I talked a little bit about Trey Smith's kind of growth in pass pro technique, particularly last year. So today, I'll go in depth on that, maybe a little bit more. Still talking about a young player. Yep. Who's improved every year in the league, particularly in that one area of weakness. And we can talk more about that. But here's the problem for me. When everyone says, oh, yeah, they're creating time. They are creating time for that particular deal. But what they're doing is now removing their flexibility to really do much else. Now, here's the deal. They can free up, I'm going to live on.
I'd rather you not if I have a vote on this.
I'm restructuring Patrick Mahomes' contract right now to the maximum amount that I can.
You want me to read you a tweet that has all of this information in it already?
Oh, who did that?
Michael Giannetti from Spot Track. So I prepare for this show. I know it doesn't sound like it, but if you just want me to give you some intel, I'm here to give intel in nice bite-sized ways.
You give the intel, my friend. I want to hear it.
Okay, so we can do this. I was going to save like the number moving for a little bit later because I think that the domino effect of all of this is going to, we can give you these numbers now if you want to get kind of the raw numbers out of the way. So over Michael Giannetti of Spot Track, he tweeted out, air quotes, quick cap fixes for the Chiefs. These are options and these are things they could do, not things that they will necessarily do. And a lot of this is going to end up being about how much money Clark Hunt wants to spend in one offseason. Some of this is going to be cash moves more so than cap moves, which is a really big distinction. But
yes, Michael something Giannetti we should talk about more in a minute.
Yes. Michael Giannetti tweeted out, you can convert Patrick Mahomes' roster bonus to signing, which adds about $26 million in cap space. Chris Jones's roster bonus to signing becomes about $12 million. Travis Kelce's roster bonus into signing can create about $10 million. And then he also suggested extending Joe Thuney at 2 years, $40 million with a $20 million bonus would give you $10 million this year. Although now we're doing offensive line math that I do want to wait to do for another beat because I think what this means for the entire O-line is fascinating. But there you go. You can free up money through players that you already are certainly going to have on the team next year. Also, we'll touch on Travis Kelce's like latest official return later on as well. But there are some big numbers for you. About $26 million just if you max out your Mahomes flexibility.
Right. And that's converting a roster bonus to a signing bonus. Yep. Like you just went through all of it. And so that's just with Mahomes. You can do Jones's stuff. You can do Kelce's stuff. You can do Thuney stuff.
47 to 48 million with Mahomes, Kelce, and Jones.
Right. And to do that, though, basically what an owner is doing is two things when they do that. They are buying cap space with cash, right? And they're also pushing cap hit down the road. And people always say, oh, that's such a dangerous game. You can't do that forever. That's only sort of true, honestly. As long as you're willing to continue to spend cash and you do it on the right players, it's not like, well, it's going to come back and bite you eventually. Well, it is if you do it with literally every contract all the time. Sure. The Saints did it for like 10 years, and it finally came back to bite them, but that was because they spent on the wrong players more so than anything else. Mm-hmm. That really was it. So those things are possible. For me, it's more of a they could have done those things before in order to have more room to play around this year. And let's face it, even if they only have like $1 million in cap, remember the year they signed Patrick Mahomes' extension, if I recall, was that the year they had like $46?
I think it was $27.
Yeah. They had like no space against the cap, and then all of a sudden they signed a $500 million contract. Mm-hmm. So they still could sign a player and his base salary is $1 million and his signing bonus is this, but then we push it in the future years because the cap once again went up more than expected. That is going to keep happening over the next 2 or 3 years at least, as the TV rights deals kind of make their big jumps, especially if they end up with that 18th game, which is coming like a freight train. That is an inevitability. It just makes everything just a little bit, it makes the pie a little bit bigger. Caps goes up. All that's going to keep happening. That's one reason why you can push stuff off into the future. But it does limit flexibility in a sense, and it really does leave everything. And Zach, you know what, Zach? I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Eisen.
Like
Zach
Rich
Eisen
or
says, do you
everyone
think
else
that
who has
someone...
that name?
Zach Eisen says, do you think that someone on the financial committee should know this, Seth? And what he's saying there's Clark Hunt is on the financial committee.
Chair of it.
Absolutely. That's someone who's on the financial committee, if he's going to actually exploit these things, needs to be willing to spend the cash now. And I know Zach agrees with this, so I'm not like arguing with him on that. Zach
is making a point very purposefully.
Yes. So these are all things. Clark Hunt knows that the cap is going to keep going up. The financial committee is well aware of this. There's a reason the Eagles are spending the way they do. They know that come 2029, you're just going to see some massive continued swings upward in cap. I get all that. It just does, unless Hunt is willing to go from someone who's fluctuated between about 9th or 10th to about 19th or 20th in cash spending, that doesn't help you as much as it could. Now, maybe they were a little more frugal on cash spending last year because Hunt said, hey, 2025 is the year I'm looking at where, yeah, I'll cut $150 million worth in cash that year. And it's not my money, so I'm not here to whatever. But that's and I will just say, Chris Anderson says in the chat, the Hunts are cheap. That's the problem. I mean, cheap, they spend about average, a little above average. So calling them cheap, it's like one of those things. It's not like a player either sucks or he's incredible, right? These are nuanced conversations, but they don't have the flexibility unless they're willing to utilize it. And that's where what you were getting at, that's where you just wonder, well, is it going to be used? Because the offensive line, Joe Tooney would have been fine at left guard in the Super Bowl. Creed Humphrey played just fine. Trey had a tough day, but not nearly as tough as what happened at left tackle and left guard. That was the biggest problem in that game. Like Trey had some struggles with Carter at times, but he also gave as good as he got on some snaps too. He struggled probably the fourth most on the offensive line, behind first Tooney and Caliendo, who both just had abysmal games. Somewhere behind those two is Jawan Taylor, who was okay-ish, but it looked way worse because everything was falling apart everywhere else. And that's one thing to keep in mind. A mediocre performance by one offensive lineman looks way worse when two guys are having an awful game. And in terms of with Smith, it would have been fine if everything else around him was fine. And that's against Jalen Carter, so you grade that on a curve. So I don't really you can run it back with that interior line, and that's great, but you got to figure out the tackle stuff to where it's not abysmal at left tackle. And it seems harder now than it did before the franchise tag. That's my hesitation there.
Well, so let's talk about Trey Smith in particular and what the Chiefs are doing, what they aren't doing here. So something here from Nate. Again, Nate is flying back from Indianapolis right now, so he'll be back on Tuesday. But I asked him if there's anything that he wanted to make sure that we got out in the show today, and we can kind of let's see how this all trickles down. Nate said, first of all, you have to remember that this was done immediately after the league confirmed the salary cap figure, which I'll bring you more on that here in a minute. And Nate says, from my viewpoint, the best scenario is that the Chiefs sign Trey to a multi-year deal before March 10th when free agency begins, and he gets the highest paid deal for a guard while not having his AAV be as high as the tag's $24 million. The baseline thing here, and Seth acknowledged the hang up of this earlier. I think this has to get done before the league year begins. I think this extension, the Trey Smith extension, must get done before free agency opens. Now, if that was going to happen anyway, is this franchise tag just like getting you through some of the tampering period? Or is this franchise tag just to tell Trey Smith and his agent, like, hey, we're at the table. We're going to get this thing done. Let's get it done by the 10th. We're telling everyone here that we're going to work with you and we're going to make the priority that we've said you're going to be. Within all of that, I mean, for this to all be a long play for them to trade Trey Smith, I'm not willing to make anything 0% anymore because too many weird things happen. But for this to be an actual, like, hey, we're gonna tag him, we're gonna tell the whole world how serious we are about coming to this long-term extension, just to drive the price up on the Bears or whatever. I guess there's a chance that happens, but I think that is an incredibly thin chance. And I don't think the Chiefs would have tagged him here if they thought they were far enough apart on a deal that they could not get it hammered out in 2 weeks. Now, if they did think they were going to get it hammered out in 2 weeks, why do you have to tag him right now?
And that's the $1 million question, right? It's likely a semi-posturing move, even in negotiations that are going well. You do things that, try to, well, hey, this is what we're going to do. So this is the number we need to work at. I know you want to work at this number, but we're working at this number because, hey, we've got you franchise tagged. And so that's, I understand wanting to keep Tooney, Creed, and Smith together. I also understand wanting to keep Creed and Smith together long term. Because Tooney, I would assume this makes it, unless they are planning on going with a cheap option at left tackle, I assume this means they're not going to extend Tooney. Now, that can buy you can extend, like you were talking about, to buy some relief for a year or two. And he's at the age to where I'm perfectly comfortable extending him. He's elite and pass pro, all that stuff. But it's my assumption is they are not going to spend, $20 million plus on every position on the offensive line.
Okay, so I got to get to the end of the salary cap number thing here so everyone has all the facts. Another way that the Star wrote this up that Nate was referring to here, from the story in the Star with Jesse Newell, Sam McDowell. Veach said the team went into the offseason believing the cap would rise to $720 million. However, that number grew higher than expected as the NFL informed teams Thursday that the number would be that would be crazy. $279.2 million.
I let it go for a minute. I was like, I think he's going to catch that because, man,
I got it.
Sign everyone.
About $9 million higher than they were expecting. Back to the story. When asked about the unexpected salary cap rise Tuesday, Veach, unprompted, spoke about Smith. That, Veach told a small group of reporters, could put Trey back into play. And here we are. So that's part of it. You also mentioned, Seth, the entire relationship of the offensive line, and I saw a comment in the chat earlier that also had me... I was in this headspace earlier. I'm going to invoke the name of one of Nate's colleagues, one of Nate's friends who does good work, who I think in this instance may have phrased something poorly. Diana Rossini was quote tweeting a thing of her own about Trey Smith and said they will still try to work on this, the long-term deal. The Chiefs addressing one of their bigger issues against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And I would agree that the offensive line was one of their bigger issues in the Super Bowl. But now they have the exact same interior. I mean, not this exact same interior as the Super Bowl, of course, because that was Joe Tooney out at tackle, something we have discussed.
And that's important. That affects Humphrey and Trey.
It does. It does. Also, we've talked about how Trey Smith and Juwan Taylor are kind of a weird pairing, and we've got at least one more year of Juwan Taylor there at right tackle. I thought maybe a guard who played a little more in space might work a little more with a tackle who plays in space that way, but we're not going to see that apparently. And we'll keep an eye on that one. Also, this means a lot for the rest of the O-line. But I do think that there is, now as that group becomes more expensive, here's my take as of this exact moment, okay? Here's my Trey Smith franchise tag, air quotes, take. I don't love this as the first move of a relatively normal offseason. Mm-hmm. If this is followed by some sort of weird Brett Veach evasive maneuver where Joe Tooney gets traded, although I do not think that he would bring you back anything resembling what you would feel like in value. It would be far less satisfying than even the L'Jarius Sneed trade was. But if it's some move with Joe Tooney, or there's a weird solution at left tackle we weren't expecting, or there's something defensively that opens up some salary space and gives you a draft pick to retool. You get a high first round pick somehow. If there's another thing that this is opening the door for, I'm open. It is way too early to call this some disastrous move for the Chiefs, short-term, long-term, whatever.
For sure.
But I think I said this a couple weeks ago, that if the Chiefs kept Trey Smith, he would be, much like Chris Jones, he would be their big free agent acquisition. It would just be keeping a guy who is already here. I stand by that, regardless of the extra $9 million the Chiefs have to work with. If keeping your right guard after a season where your offensive line was a persistent storyline in a negative sense, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel very good. So how do you feel about where this stands now in the direction that it's pointed? Because I'm finding myself a little bit conflicted, and I'm finding quite a few Chiefs fans seem a little bit conflicted because we saw last season. Trey Smith has never been the problem, and I would argue he probably never will be the problem. But it's a lot of money on a flawed roster.
And that's where...
And let's take a break.
No.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Seth, we still have 2 per show, and that was the first one. So in a little while, we're going to do a second one. You've got this. How do you feel? What's the sentiment bubbling up in you right now on not just the tag, but this, because we're on the same page, right? We are expecting this to be step 1 of a 5-year deal that's really a 4-year deal, right?
Yeah, but shouldn't we take a break before we talk about this?
Yeah, we really should.
So for me, what makes it tough, and this is the problem. Trey Smith's a good player. I think, like I said on Tuesday, I think it makes sense for a lot of teams to pay him top of market money. I don't know if the Chiefs are one of them. I will say this, because I see some people, and the pendulum swings so far on players where now all of a sudden it's like, well, Trey's a problem. He's not worth this, not worth that. You'd ask people in the middle of the season, everyone would have said he's one of the best guards in the league. It's a both and thing. There's all sorts of.
Can I ask you one question you're not going to have an answer for?
Oh boy.
Was he not one of the best guards in the league with a long-term fit in Kansas City 365 days ago? That might be my beef right now.
And that's where letting and they re-signed Creed. They clearly prioritized that. I think for me, if you always viewed him as a foundational guy, I don't really understand. Exactly. I will say this year may have convinced them he's a foundational guy. The reason for that being, not necessarily, no. But one thing I will say is what they likely saw is the work he's been doing with Duke, Manny Weather, and some of the stuff I was talking about Tuesday, right? The improvements in his pass pro sets, in terms of how he utilizes a lot of independent striking with his hands. That was newer this year. Like, he's done it in the past, but he's improved at it every year. And so what this could be for them is, look, this is a smart player who's got a lot of physical talent, who's gotten better every single year. And so we think that he's gone from, he's going to go from a good pass protector to a really good pass protector or whatever, right? Like we think the ceiling hasn't been hit yet. So we actually are still, we're investing in him. So we see him as a core guy because of those improvements we've seen. Fair enough. Like I said Tuesday, I'm not going to flip out about it. I'm not going to be upset.
Can I be the devil's advocate on just some things you said just there?
Sure.
Reminds me a lot of what we all said and heard about Juwan Taylor. It's a different position, and I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be like, Trey Smith's going to fall apart like Juwan Taylor did. But, like, in terms of paying young, presumably ascending offensive linemen, I really like the word foundational that you used there. Where you say, we're going to pay this guy like a foundational piece. You just must be correct. And they weren't correct about Juwan Taylor. He's a nice tackle. He is not a foundational piece.
Yep.
I don't know. Gives me a little pause. Just, I'm hearing some words that sound familiar.
Right. But, if they make that, if you make that same determination about X player, I don't know if you can really... I don't know if you can base your next evaluation on that. I think you do
that's
have.
True. It's at a less valuable position would be my other thing, but it just
Yeah. And like for
material.
me, like Smith has been a better pro than Taylor was throughout his career.
Yes,
Taylor
absolutely.
had his best season. You arguably bought on the most expensive moment there with him, whereas Juwan Taylor wasn't a good player his first year. Trey was good his first year, better the next year, had his best season last year. At least, and I haven't reviewed every snap. That's just kind of what I've seen. I saw some improvements in pass pro. And then one thing that's really worth noting again is anytime you have a really significant weakness at one spot on offensive line, it makes everyone look worse except like the center because he's kind of removed from everything in a sense. And that makes everything so problematic. Some of the times that, Trey Smith or Juwan Taylor, quote unquote, kind of lost their rep in the Super Bowl. If you don't have a catastrophe on the other side of the line, it's not going to necessarily be nearly as noticeable or problematic. So all that has to be taken. But honestly, anytime you got to spend this much, sneeze coming.
Bless you, double sneezer. There we go.
Yep. You can't mute that though.
I wasn't quick enough.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna have one more coming at some point here. But anyway,
I'll just mute you now. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Anytime you've got to spend this much oxygen justifying why you might do something, it should at least give you pause, right? So again, there's good reasons to do it if they've signed off on being more aggressive in their spending this year. Again, that's not a Clark is cheap commentary. So I just had Sean in the comments, use the inside of your elbow. Geez, what year is it? You know what? In my office alone
Sean, I think that's a great point. I'm going to go ahead and move on to talking about what else this might mean for the Chiefs offensive line and really the team building all together, because I think there's a lot of great points being made throughout this show and in the chat right now.
Josh is out here saving me from myself. Goodness gracious.
I can't smother your sneezes for you, but the least I can do is mute you.
Yeah, well, God forbid I spread some germs to myself. Anyway.
but Seth, why that one? Why that
you
fight?
Me.
Why that one?
Why that fight? I don't know. Sorry, Sean. I'm sure you're a good dude. So anyway, the question that I have here is this is it a move that precedes? And I kind of like the way you framed it. If this is the
Taco's comment here, Josh dressed like he's ready to star in the final season of Stranger Things. Thank you, Taco. I take that as a very high compliment. Back to you, Seth.
No, absolutely. That is a great comment. And you know what? It's kind of true. And you look good, my friend. You always do.
Thank you.
If this is a prelude to, okay, we view Trey as a foundational guy, fair enough. And we are going to be willing to spend the cash to make sure this doesn't particularly limit us in other areas this year, to where it's not like, well, our big free agent acquisition was bringing back Trey. Well, that would be frustrating for me because there's a difference between that and, well, our biggest free agent acquisition was bringing back Chris Jones.
Those are different players, different impact.
Different players, different roles. There's a difference between a superstar left tackle would be more apt in terms of what you're talking about here. And that's where I've turned off the chat. I don't even want to know what you're smiling at.
You're good.
Okay. So that to me is the question that I have. Is this going to be something that limits you elsewhere? Because you got to address the left tackle problem. And here's actually my bigger problem with it. I like them keeping Creed and Trey next to each other. That's like a next 5 years thing. Fire and forget. Great. If you have a plan around that. My issue is, what is the plan at offensive line? Because, okay, we draft Kingsley Suamataia. We love how he looks in preseason. He is still so much so that we don't play him much. That's going to bother me. But like from the beginning, the plan here, okay, we love Kingsley Suamataia so much, we're not going to play him that much, but then we're going to yank him out extremely quickly. Yes, it was a horrifyingly bad game against Trey Hendrickson, but I mean, someone commented, like, we watched Sky Moore struggle to make an impact for 2 years.
Yeah.
And And I get
Sky Moore being bad can't get Patrick Mahomes decapitated, but it can make Patrick Mahomes' life a lot worse. Like, I think that's fair.
It definitely can, and did. And that's where, well, you can adjust the offense. They adjusted the offense all kinds of ways around Joe Thuney and Mike Caliendo on the back half of the season. You couldn't do that earlier in the year. You couldn't wildly protect your rookie left tackle, but you wildly protected your veteran left guard that you moved to left tackle rather than putting that rookie left tackle back out there. It didn't occur to you to not put him on an island constantly those first 2 weeks. What's the plan there? And now, okay, so now Joe Thuney is kind of in that last year of the contract. What's the plan if it's not Suamataia at right guard to replace Thuney or to replace Smith? Is the plan to are we giving up on him? Is he going to be a rotational guy? Are you trying him at left tackle? And if you are trying him again at left tackle, that's fine. His college tape is solid. He fits the athletic profile perfectly, like to a T. Built terrifically for the position, good college tape, no reason to give up on him. But then the overall plan is what frustrates me. Step 1 doesn't match up with step 4 and step 7, and that doesn't seem cohesive. It seems like there's a bunch of midstream canoe hopping, and that's what's frustrating for me.
And I think that this comment a second ago, from David, saying, does this mean that they don't love the free agent left tackles? We're talking about DJ Humphries and a rookie here, or DJ Humphries and Kingsley, maybe. That's what I'm a little bit worried about. And Op is howling out in the living room. That's a new one for him. I maybe Nate's at my house. I don't know. I'll go find out in a second. But that's another part of it to me where I understand if you say, hey, look, we are not going to be able to acquire an offensive lineman as good as Trey Smith this offseason. So we are going to keep Trey Smith. I hear that. Absolutely. Totally fair. You are really doing an inside-out offensive line building philosophy once again that makes me a little bit nervous.
After seeing the limitation of that, right? Now, here's the deal. Does this mean they've learned a lesson? Andy Reid's comment on we're going to keep, Joe inside. We're going to let him get back to doing what he's doing, what he does so well. You know what? And you know what? That Stephen Holmitten comment is a really important one when talking about taking a left tackle in the first round this year. Okay, that's going to be really important. So I'll come back to that. But Andy's comment on moving Thuney inside, that's one thing when people are like, well, the interior offensive line failed. Not really. Not the one they've been using. You created a glaring weakness there. That's problematic. And because Thuney was not as good at left tackle as people were saying, I think it's safe to say that now. I think a lot of people got mad at me. And again, what Joe Thuney was doing was incredible. There's a reason he won the team MVP award. Him able to play at a subpar level at left tackle is unbelievable. That you could game plan around it. But people acting like he morphed into this shutdown guy. No, the offense changed. That's what they should have done with Kingsley in week 2. One problem is they couldn't really do it as much because Rashee Rice got hurt shortly thereafter. Hollywood Brown, they just found out it was going to be a long-term thing. Xavier Worthy wasn't ready yet. So, apples and oranges. I get it. Maybe what they should have done was throw in Humphries or Kingsley and let Joe Thuney get back to doing what he's elite at during the playoffs. What do I know? Whatever. I don't see the cohesiveness of the plan building from the inside out if you have no plan at left tackle. We've seen that even when Thuney was playing left guard and Creed was playing center and Smith was playing right guard, you saw that if you don't have even subpar play at left tackle, because once Wanya Morris got hurt, he started just getting toasted. It doesn't work. We watched that against the Raiders, and it was just problematic. So I just don't see the cohesive plan in place. And people that are saying, well, okay, Humphries and a first round left tackle. That comment that I highlighted there, that Kingsley Suamataia would be a first rounder if he was the exact same guy coming out this year, that's probably accurate. Keep in mind, everyone, people were surprised the Chiefs were able to draft Kingsley where they drafted him. There were some people that thought he might slip into the end of the first round. That is the same level of prospect you're going to get here. Lots of teams need left tackles.
I'll even add to that to say that in my still quite early draft catch up, which by the way, you can pre-order the KCSN draft guide right now, by the way. That will be the thing that gets this show up to speed in a major way. But even with a little bit of early check-in on the draft class, do you know what the free space on your bingo card is for this class of tackles, might be a guard.
Oof.
It's there's a ton of those guys. And I think it was Mina Kimes. Maybe she was talking to Mike Renner, maybe. They were going through some of that, and I think his top tackle had that question. Like, I think he can do it. I think he can play tackle, but there's some question about if he needs to kick it and play a guard. I hate to play into one of your greatest hits here, but there's a lot of mystery boxes that could have a boat behind that door that happens during the draft, and especially at a position like this. I don't think that any Chiefs fans should be thinking that there is a rookie left tackle fix. Like, I think Chiefs fans should have experienced themselves out of that headspace by now, but I don't know.
And it could happen, but we've seen now, like, it's not like Hunter Norzad came in and lit everything on fire. What happened with Creed and Trey should not be considered like this is super likely, right? Having someone come in and being good right out of the gate, that's just so hard to do. And again, at tackle, those guys go sooner. They go so much sooner. If you've got a guy with, that you think is a potential really, really good, maybe even star guard, you might get that guy at 31. You got no shot at getting hit a tackle of that caliber that people think could come in year one. You got no shot at 31 and no shot at 25. So all the same things still apply. And so for me, again, I think there's a possibility that their plan is Kingsley Suamataia and DJ Humphries. And honestly, if it weren't for the fact that Humphries just couldn't get apparently healthy enough, or they were worried about continuity, I think, down the stretch. Mm-hmm. I screamed about that. I hated it, but this isn't Madden, and I get that. It turned out to backfire, sort of. I mean, they lost in the Super Bowl. It's like, oh boy, that sure blew up in your face. Yes, in one game before the Super Bowl. Like, they made it to the Super Bowl. So I don't love there's just not continuity with the plan. And that's the thing that bothers me the most. If you want to give Kingsley Suamataia another shot at left tackle, I'm all for it. I just hate that he got the hook so quickly. And part of me really wonders, and I saw someone commented on this earlier, I wonder how many of the decisions that got made last year were made with the three-peat in mind. Sometimes I wonder how much the burden affected certain things. And they saw Suamataia struggling. They knew they had Wanye Morris on the bench, who's passable at left tackle, and they just went for it. And then once they did that, they knew they couldn't put him back out there and then pull him again.
I also have wondered that, but the left tackle spot feels like the one that is still makes the least sense. Yes. Because you just said it. Like, I heard, maybe they decided to go with Wanye Morris instead. Like, come on. Like, the guy they started the year with, they chose over Wanye Morris in training camp. It was week 2. I mean, there were many times where, Xavier Worthy got a little more work and continued to work his way into the rotation because you needed him for the end of the three-peat, right? Right. Ultimately, you needed Kingsley to complete the three-peat the way that things went, or you needed Humphries or whoever. So maybe the last thing on the offensive line for today that I wanted to, because you've mentioned all of these names and you've gone kind of like through the big picture of it all. Where does this leave you with Kingsley, with Wanye Morris, with the other young unknowns? Because I had kind of accepted that Kingsley was going to move to guard as just his next thing. Was he going to start? Was he going to practice there in training camp? I don't know. But the way that he got yanked off stage in week 2, never to really see the light of day in a genuine way again, and then was active in the playoffs, made me think that, again, like, there's some sixth linemen and like maybe some guard flexibility there. I was going that direction. Now, Kingsley is at best your third option at guard, entering his second year with basically 2 games of NFL experience under his belt.
Right.
Or he's your current incumbent starting left tackle. Like, that's the tension for me, is right now, if all of this holds, and if they keep Tooney and they keep Smith for 2025, they are either viewing Kingsley Suamataia as their third guard and a guy they would not play at guard to save $20 million annually, or a guy that maybe can take that spot from Tooney going forward as his rookie contract peels away, by the way. The entire appeal of drafting a guard highly would be to get him on the freaking field because you need to do it while he's cheap. Or week 1 next year might be Kingsley out there opening night. I guess not opening night this time, but out there week 1. I don't think there's any middle ground there. I think he's either a legitimate option at left tackle or he's your third guard.
And that's really the issue, like you said, with this decision. It's like, okay, so why were you playing? And I have a running theory that they gave Kingsley the hook maybe sooner than they should have. Maybe it was a little reactionary. And then down the stretch, they're like, well, look, we can't throw him back out there at left tackle because, I mean, these are people. You got to understand that, like, you can't completely destroy a 21-year-old psyche. Like, and that can happen. And
you
so
tried to do it many times early in this podcast history.
And so it could be that it could be that they gave him snaps at guard because they knew he could kind of do it, and they wanted to get him some "you're not getting killed out there" snaps.
Sure.
And there's value in that. And that would make sense towards you're going to be left tackle next year. It almost makes sense to me in a sense of, like, they basically maybe after that week 2 thing sat him down like, hey, you're not ready, but you are a left tackle of the future. Everything we do from here on out is to prepare you for next year. Then I guess some of this makes sense.
Sure.
But Chiefs fans aren't going to necessarily like that.
And I don't think the Chiefs' actions showed that.
I would argue that it could, in theory, if you're like, no, you're our guy next year, that means you don't slide him in there when Wanye Morris isn't playing well and is playing hurt. You don't slide him in there when DJ Humphries is hurt. You only do the emergency thing during, like, the Broncos game or whenever it was, I think, and then get someone else out there because you're our left tackle next year. This is our plan. That would at least... there would be consistency with the plan there. That's why you don't play him in the Super Bowl. That's why you're not, you threw him at right guard, you threw him here and there, but just to get snaps so that way you could, get used to the speed of the game, all that stuff. Although, as Joe Tooney just showed us, playing guard, playing tackle, 2 different things. Then I guess I can see that as a long-term plan. And that's what would make the most sense with what they're doing. I think. What makes the most sense is if you don't think you're spending much money on right guard or on left tackle. And so that's like DJ Humphries. We're going to have you're a veteran. You're going to be fully healthy now. You're going to be fully back in the swing of things. Then we are going to, then we're going to move forward and let the veteran compete with the rookie and end up doing pretty well. And again, DJ Humphries' 2023 film, I liked in Pass Pro. He clearly, he had the hamstring tweak. Clearly wasn't healthy for a while, and then I think they were spooked of continuity issues.
Maybe this is the solution. Paz Luke, Josh Uche, left tackle? Yeah, I think I've earned a break. Let's take one.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Let's talk about the other news of the day, which could have been the biggest news of any day if it would have been revealed differently. But we have had this intel trickling in as Andy Reid says, no, Travis Kelce is going to take some time. And then Brett Veach says, yeah, we're expecting Travis Kelce to be back. And then today, apparently, Pat McAfee texts Travis Kelce. He's like, hey, can you just clear this up? And Travis Kelce says, I'm coming back. Since then, the New Heights Twitter account has done the whole Wolf of Wall Street, I'm not bleeping leaving kind of thing. So I think we can go ahead and officially call, we kind of already had, but the Travis Kelce will be back in 2025. I don't really care to talk about this being the swan song and the final chapter and all of that, the last dance. I don't know if he will ever say that before the season kicks off. He may be in St. Joe saying, I'm just here to be here this year, and we'll figure it out. But it is the last year of his current deal. They can restructure that and move that cap number around. And Travis Kelce back in a Chiefs uniform at least for one more season. We've talked a lot about what he has been as a player, Seth, and what he was last year. I'm a little bit more interested in kind of maybe taking this as the 201 version, where we know their weapons are going to be different. We know that he should not be the centerpiece of the offense. I think we know he was not going to be the centerpiece this year until all of the injuries happened. But with all that being said and all of that in the playbook now, what are you thinking about Travis Kelce being back for the 2025 season?
I would have absolutely loved it if everyone that reported on it today noted that Nate literally announced this on Tuesday's live stream. He literally told the world Travis Kelce's coming back next year. Yeah. And like only a few people, like there's a few aggregators that I know watch the show and then tweet out some of the stuff Nate says. Never the stuff you or I say, which is fair, honestly.
Yeah,
like we're not out here breaking news.
Nate also had Trey Smith growing optimism on a 5-year deal, and Nate also had that the franchise tag was not going to happen. So, no one bats 1,000. Nobody bats 1,000.
Yeah, nobody bats 1,000. It happens. I would just say
666. Wait a second.
Easy. 667.
It's true. No, we're not rounding down because we need it to be 333 on the other side. So.
Oh, fair enough. But you can round up when it's 6. Hey, son. I think
did your son hear you say 66666 and just like come on checking on you, just like make sure you hadn't been possessed?
Just wanted to make sure I was doing all right. I think the big thing, like we talked about Tuesday, is understanding that his role in the offense can't be to be the guy. And honestly, I think if they really want to maximize him, if they're able to, like, let's say Rice is back after 2 to 4 games and Worthy develops this offseason, which, by the way, Worthy got a little bit better every year in college. Worth noting, he was 21 most of last year. Young dude, and he's hitting that age, 22, 23, 24. He's going to put on 5 or 10 pounds of muscle that are desperately, desperately needed. Honestly, he could even put on a little fat, dude. Like, it's okay. If you run a 4.29 and weigh 180 pounds, I think you're better off than a 4.21 at 165, because there were times I was legitimately frightened for your safety. Tough guy. Never, like, you saw some hits bounce up. You could tell it hurt. A tough guy. But holy cow, dude. Like, whoever said it's not about the size of the dog in the fight has clearly never seen a Rottweiler fight a Chihuahua. You know what I mean? Like, these things matter. Not that I fight dogs. I should clarify. That's not a thing that I do. So,
do you want me to mute your mic?
yeah, you're not muting my mic at the right times.
Well,
so
yeah.
I think with Kelce, there's a possibility that he could actually have a more productive year, especially efficiency-wise. His efficiency numbers plummeted this year. I think he could have a significantly more productive year next year with the offense being built around the skill set of Worthy, Rice, and TBD. So I'm excited to see that. I would love it if his swan song came with less of a burden than has been placed on him the last several years.
This is not a serious take. I did just want to mention that I saw a Bengals reporter talking about where the Bengals are at right now. And we really are talking about, like, hey, so would you rather have Trey Smith or T. Higgins? Like, just like that is a real, just like, I just thought Seth's eyes just did something crazy. That's a conversation worth having. I don't think it's going to ever be T. Higgins. I don't think this team values T. Higgins. They could have 5 years ago, would have made me very happy. But in this space that we're talking about here, you only have so much budget money, and you can either just play Kingsley at right guard and have T. Higgins, or you can have Trey Smith at right guard and Sky Moore breakout year as you're rounding out that wide receiver rotation. Nico Remigio getting it done on special teams. So I don't know. It's something to keep in mind is they do have to continue to cobble all this together. But
right,
yeah, same boat I think in terms of the Kelce thing, and I think we've covered most of what this entire balancing act should have been, was going to be this season, what it needs to be next year. And like, right. I'm happy at this point, honestly. Like, I am happy that will not be the final game of Travis Kelce's career.
I think he is too.
There's no guarantee that his final game will be any better. There is certainly no guarantee that it will be in a Super Bowl. Certainly no guarantee they'll win it. Nothing is guaranteed at any point throughout all of this. But right. Because he signed the 2-year deal, and because so many of us who were right every second of the way, like maybe me perhaps, who never believed that he was gonna quit after not completing his contract, like I always kind of had at least the majority of belief that the plan was to play out that 2-year deal. I also think it's going to be kind of nice, and at some point it's going to be infuriating because people are going to get sick of cool things because that's just what happens.
Right.
But I think it'll be kind of nice. He's not going to get the Mariano Rivera treatment where like every stadium they give him a rocking chair made of broken bats or whatever. Like I don't think that we're going to have pregame ceremonies for Travis Kelce on the road around the NFL. But I think it'll be nice to have what hopefully will be kind of definitive, that like this is your last chance to watch Travis Kelce play football. And maybe it's for 60% of the snaps, but it's 60% more than you're ever going to get to see the greatest tight end of all time ever do this again. So I'm genuinely, I am heartened. I am happy about all of this on a level that kind of goes beyond just what the X's and O's are going to look like.
Right.
And also it means, now look, we'll see if they work with this, but it gives them one more year to complete the transition of whatever the offense is going to be.
Absolutely.
You might be able to argue, we've talked about this, I think, a little bit recently. Like, you might be able to argue that a full cut, like a actual overhaul might be what it takes to install the next version of the Chiefs offense. But knowing how they've done things, I'm glad that, knock on wood, that Jared Wiley will get a full season behind Travis Kelce, that Noah Gray has one more full year of not having to be the main tight end. Apparently, this is a pretty interesting tight end draft class, too.
Yep.
Go ahead and spend another draft pick on a tight end if you want, and give me the Gray, Wiley, third guy trio in the future post-Kelce. But all of that is so intertwined for me, and I'm just glad that we're going to get to see one more year of Travis Kelce. And I don't know, the Chiefs don't do a lot of number retiring at this point, but maybe the last run of seeing a red, white, and gold 87.
Yes. All of that is absolutely true. It gives people should just try to appreciate it and try to genuinely enjoy, like you said, watching him do his thing, watching him, it won't be every week, but he'll have weeks where he turns back the clock and gives them everything they need. And it's a cool thing. And again, if they find a way to open up the offense around him, that'll give him an opportunity to be a lot more efficient with his touches. And that would be really cool to see, I think, after really grinding it out the last couple of years.
Yep. It would be nice for it to be a slightly easier season for him physically that results in a much more proper send-off than what this year would have been.
Right. I think there's a chance. I think had they won, I think there's a chance he would have retired. I think even had they lost a close game, I think there's a bigger chance of him retiring. But I think that, especially hearing like his brother talk about how hard it was to even watch. Like, I mean, I think that was, and hearing him talk, like, watch, he's like, well, yeah, had it been an effing game. Like, he's sitting, I mean, you can tell, I mean, that bothers him. So I think that probably affected how things went.
And then this is probably a topic that you are going to be writing about pretty soon in the Chief in the North newsletter, the Brett Veach series and all of that. So I know these are players we've talked about a lot, but I just threw this out to Tucker when we were kicking around topic ideas for today. And because I think I think one of these is going to happen. And I think the other conversation about the other player is, I don't know, leaving some fans slightly divided. I don't think this is a super, super hot issue right now, but it will be when the eventual contract numbers would come in.
Yes.
But let's talk about where the Chiefs are at right now in the Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis contract extension plans and opportunities. They can extend either of those players, and then also that 5th-year option deadline it will be just around the corner.
Yep.
You assume the Chiefs pick up the 5th-year option on both of these guys if deals are not done at that time. The 5th-year option is calculated in a way where it's much larger than what their 4th-year number was going to be, but it's still good to have that kind of control on a player who outperformed the rookie contract. McDuffie and Karlaftis have both outperformed their current contract. They've both been incredibly important players to this defense. They've probably led the team in defensive snaps taken since they were drafted.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Chris Jones missed a little bit of time.
Yep.
Those guys almost never miss time. Justin Reed's probably up there. I'm sure I can add all that up off air, and I don't even know if it would matter anyway. You shouldn't care. But hugely important. But I think in my opinion, I think in your opinion, 2 different calibers of players, even though they're both high caliber players.
Yes.
Where are you at right now? And if you are Brett Veach in this moment, this Trey Smith tag just got slapped down. What kind of conversations are you having with Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis right now?
I think, well, that's another thing with the Smith tag. I don't know what that looks like. And, most of McDuffie's money would be in probably not even in 26. It would probably be mostly 27 and thereafter. If I were the Chiefs, I would try to extend Trent McDuffie now. Price is just going to go up. And if you extend him now, the way this works with negotiations is they build in what the current contract looks like into negotiations. So if you have 2 years of cheap control left, that gets built into the negotiation. So people say, well, you give up a year of cheap control. You do, but it gets built in to the number, to the cap hit, to the bonus, to all of that stuff. McDuffie was a really, really good corner the second he stepped on the field.
Zach Eisen makes a good point. It was almost like the second he stepped on the field because he did get hurt in his rookie season. Yeah. I completely forget about that.
And that's part of where in 22
he still came back and was an absolute monster.
When the defense went from doing okay to good in 2022, when Trent McDuffie came back from injury, and then it was him and Snead and Watson, and it was like, ooh, wait, I think we got something here. And by the way, Watson's a dark horse for that too, in terms of like extensions, that kind of stuff. Yeah. He's had a little more injury trouble, but he's not the same caliber player. He's a little more limited. But really, with Trent, it's pretty easy. You extend him as soon as possible. See if he's open to it. See if he's open to baking in. Hey, yeah, I understand that you're waiting. You're getting paid a year or two earlier, which means it's not going to be quite as much as it would be in a couple of years. But we're taking away some of the risk in case you get injured or whatever. And then you'd hit free agency a little earlier than you would on your third contract. And also, what's this in my hand? And this is where, again, if franchising Trey Smith is leading to still some willingness to spend cash. Oh, hey, Trent, you've made decent money as a pro. How do you feel about this $25 million check in my hand? That's called a signing bonus. All you got to do is sign this, and I hand this to you, and you get to deposit it. You can do all that. He's an elite corner. He is exceptional. You can play him literally anywhere on the field. One of the best 5 corners in the NFL, and he's not 5. So that one's easy. He's a foundational player. Karlaftis is a really good player who part of what he's really good at is he's good in run defense. He's a good high effort guy. If George Karlaftis is your third best pass rusher, you should be doing pretty well. Mm-hmm. But it does depend on the quality of those first 2 pass rushers. But he is not. He plays a position that top of market deals are incredibly tough. They're incredibly high. And because of that trickles down and you end up paying big money for certain guys. Karlaftis to me is a guy that you obviously do the 5th-year option. You obviously keep him on the team. I don't know if I extend him after year 4. It just depends on what price he's willing to pay, simply because, and you get to see, okay, does he take yet another little step forward? How much of a step? How much more does he continue to up his one-on-one wins? If he keeps upping that becomes a very different conversation. Because he's a high effort guy. He's going to give you everything he's got. He executes the system well. I think so Adam Sheehan asks, is Karlaftis closer to Amenahu money? That's actually an interesting conversation because of his age and all that kind of stuff. There's a conversation to be had there. Like right now, if he hit free agency, what would he get? And I'm guessing probably at least 15, 16 million a year, something like that.
I think I would take the over. I'm going to build my case for that in a second, but I think I'd take the over.
And so I don't know if he's a player you can afford that with, because that just, I just don't know. Like, I think 15, 16 million, fair enough. I think probably, though, it's probably more like 21, 22, 23. And suddenly you're having a tough conversation. So I think Karlaftis is a guy you wait and see. Does he continue to get a little bit better at winning those one-on-ones, pressuring the quarterback more on his own? Great cleanup sack guy. How many of these is he creating on his own and is not reliant on Jones or to a lesser extent Amenahu to create that pressure, and then he cleans up? I would say that's something you have to take a look at. So you let him play that 4th year. You do the 5th year option. Maybe have some conversations with him before the 5th year option. See if he takes something relatively team friendly. But I think you let him play out his 5th year option unless you see a decent jump in his game.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And here's actually Karlaftis has a ton of similarities with Trey Smith in the things I'm about to describe, which I thought would probably lead to Trey Smith making more sense somewhere else. It's also why I think George Karlaftis probably makes more sense signing somewhere else. Those guys are extremely easy to pay. It would be so easy on the field, off the field, the whole deal. If you are a general manager of some less successful team and you are trying to build up your organization, you are trying to keep a good relationship with ownership and your head coach, and you want to have players who are going to be good long-term, like building blocks of your franchise that are going to be culture builders and tone setters and all of that, who are also young ascending players. Here's one of the best young guards in football, great locker room guy, and the Chiefs are apparently now working to keep him.
Mm-hmm.
George Karlaftis has played 17, 16, and 16 games. He has 24.5 sacks in those 3 years in the regular season. He has 8 sacks in the playoffs. He has become more well-known in his many postseason opportunities.
Yes.
He is playing constantly. It's not just that he is appearing in these games. He's playing outrageous percentages of the snap count. He is an effort guy. I think he's a support rusher, if that makes sense. I'm kind of bringing almost like we're going to use a little video game terminology maybe to make that make sense. But like, to your point, if you got Chris Jones next to you, it's hard to come up with a guy you'd rather have him lined up next to than George Karlaftis. Myles Garrett would do. Like,
yes.
the absolute elite guys. But if you're saying, hey, you've got a tier 1 guy in Chris Jones, pick a tier 2, low tier 2, high tier 3 kind of guy to put next to him. George Karlaftis makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But I don't think the Chiefs should give him 16, 17, 18 million this year, or, per year this offseason. I don't think that's a number they ought to give. And I don't think Karlaftis probably should take the number that the Chiefs would give at this point, unless he just really wants some long-term security. But that 5th year option's a good payday, and
yes.
Injuries can happen to anybody. No one is such a hard worker that they can't get hurt. But with Karlaftis' track record at this point, I think him getting to free agency and then, like, honestly, getting overpaid in a pretty big way should probably be what his path is.
Right. And that's the overpaid in a big way. When you think of sack numbers, that's something that teams overpay for. Should they know better? I think so. But and we've talked about this ad nauseum here, and we're over an hour, so I won't get into it. But the reality of the situation with a guy who has high sack numbers, you got to ask yourself, how many of those were the result of him winning one-on-one? How many of those were the quarterback bailed around the right side and he just chased him down? Now, there is still some value in that. You're a guy with recognition, with effort, with motor, with athleticism, all those things. But you've got to take that stuff into consideration. Based on his current resume, he's on track to price himself out of what Kansas City should pay him, I think. But we'll see. He's gotten a little better every year. Has already surpassed what I thought his ceiling was as a player when he was drafted. And so we'll see what happens. I just think it's just such a different track than Trent McDuffie.
Yes. And again, I think when you do pay players and you do retain your own this way, eventually you start making some difficult decisions to part ways. We will make the difficult decision to part ways with you here now, as we are over an hour, and we did it all without Nate. So good work, Seth. I only had to mute you a couple of times, and I feel like I hopefully won't let this power go to my head. We'll be back on Tuesday with Nate. We'll get a little more on where the Trey Smith thing stands. I presume we will be closer to a long-term contract at that point, and we'll be able to break that down with Nate back from the combine, hopefully well-rested and hydrated. And in the meantime, Seth, the honor falls to you to please get us out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. Tucker, I'm ready whenever you are. Achoo!